much for joining us. And thank you, Stacy, for joining us today as well. I'll introduce you in a second. I'm just going to go over a little bit of the what's going on with this webinar. So it is being recorded. So if you do want to share this with your colleagues after the session, you're very welcome to. If you do have any questions, you're also very welcome to ask questions during the session. If it's really relevant to what Stacy or myself are talking about at the time, I might stop the webinar and let us have that question, or we might wait until the end as well. So but you're very welcome to get involved and ask questions. Also, this session is part of the Totara community, so if you're not already a member of the Totara community, it is free to join. You can come in, and there's lots of training in there, and there's lots of webinars and things as well. So you're welcome to connect with peers and have a chat. So please come and have a look. So really happy to introduce Stacy and looking forward to the session. So Stacy, would you mind just saying hello to the community and introducing yourself?
Sure. So, kia ora, hello. I'm Stacie Swindon, and I'm a senior learning and development consultant at Waka Kotahi, which is the New Zealand Transport Agency. I've been in the field of HR for about 15 years, with 7 of those being in L&D. I used to do most of my work in the fast-moving consumer goods industry back in South Africa, and I moved into the public sector when I immigrated to New Zealand with my family in 2020. Just a little bit more about me. I'm a mum of 2. Matt will know. We talk a lot about our kids, and I am always asking questions. I'm always trying to figure out things. I have a passion for community. I think being able to share and learn from one another is such a powerful tool. So thank you for those that have joined. And Matt, thank you for having me today.
No, thanks so much, Stacey. And yeah, I would say thank you for the tips and advice. And Stacey's a naturally very sharing person, I would say. So very thankful for the tips and advice you've given me on L&D already as well, and little communities and things that I can join as well. So thanks so much.
No
Really
worries.
great person to connect with. So one thing, the topic of this conversation, this webinar, something that I know that I've definitely been guilty of in my career is that someone who makes content. So I make training content. I've made a lot of training content in my life, but I feel like I always probably make too much content. I feel like I'm the solution to a training answer is often more training. Could be an ebook, could be a whole course, could be a video, but it usually results in me making something, and it also makes me feel justified that I've done something. I've tried to solve something. And I wonder what you think about that. Really, that reflection of just making more content all the time.
Mm-hmm. So I think I've also been in that space. I think definitely earlier on in my L&D career, I felt like I needed to create content because, as the saying goes, content is king. But something that I've really tried to understand is that, yes, even though content might be king, are people actually engaging with it? And I think it's really being able to understand who's our audience, what do they actually need? And I think sometimes it needs us to take a step back and look at the content that we've created and actually see, is it actually relevant? Is it actually hitting a need? So that's what I do.
Yeah, so today we're really going to focus in this session about how we can move away from just making content and try and take a slightly different approach. So,
Mhm.
Stacey, you've been reflecting a lot recently on building a different approach to just
Mhm.
building content, and I wonder if you could talk us through a little bit of that idea.
Yep. So I love this meme. It's quite apt, I think. And as learning professionals, I know that we're always faced with people coming to us and saying, hey, I've got this learning solution in mind. You need to create something. And they haven't really actually even uncovered what the real problem is. So this is defined by Nigel Harrison as solutioneering. So people come to a solution, they jump to a solution, and they say, this is going to fix it. And I think as learning professionals, we are sometimes seen as either being blockers or it's just been simply, you are learning professionals, you need to deliver the solution, so do it. But I think with this performance consulting conversation approach, it really helps us to partner with the stakeholder and we can start focusing on what are the key gaps that we need to actually start closing. It allows for me to ask the right questions It's also making sure that we're having the right conversations with the right people before we actually even move to the actual solution. So I think what we need to do is look at the problem with a holistic view, and then we build a powerful solution together. And then it also will have some proper measurements in place so that we can start seeing some performance improvements.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Stacey. And just reflecting on that for a second, I wonder if anyone else in the audience has ever felt guilty of that, really, of just creating more content for the sake of it. And when you talk about performance consulting as a sort of an alternative solution, I wonder if you could think through a bit more, like what are some of the benefits of that as well?
So I think for me, the benefits of performance consulting, it really helps us shape and influence the learning culture that we want to establish within the organization. I think for me, we want to try and move away from the notion that learning is the sole solution. We understand that. People say, oh, put a module, do some training, it'll fix it. If we can foster a culture of learning, I think it's then seen as one piece of the larger performance puzzle. I think also when we do performance consulting, it helps us identify the real need or the challenges that the business is having. And this will then in turn help with not creating unnecessary learning. So being able to actually uncover the root cause and identifying the best solution that will support the organizational goals. Um, I think for me as well, it's about identifying opportunities. So we go beyond what the solution the stakeholders have in mind. Um, we can possibly explore alternative approaches and identify opportunities that we may not have considered in initial thinking. So moving away from the solutioneering to really problem identification. Um, and then I think also having real measurements in place, measuring and having better measurements and evaluation of our initiatives by implementing the right solution. I think when we see performance improvements, this becomes a tangible way to measure the impact of our work. I think that's always the biggest thing. It also allows us to demonstrate the value and effectiveness of the learning that we're actually putting out there into the business. And then lastly, I think for me, it's around building the capability within the organization. It's when we do performance consulting, it isn't just about solving the problem. I think it's really about empowering the business to identify and address the challenges on their own. I think it's also about having the right conversations and enabling the stakeholders to think critically about their need, and then leveraging what existing resources do we actually have. What are some of the solutions that we could do before then considering creating new ones?
Yeah, definitely. And I think one of the things about creating content there is that you have that tangible piece that you can then show to your colleagues and say, like, well, we've done this work and it's there.
Mm,
And one of the things you mentioned then is those outcomes, the sort of tangible thing that you do have. I wonder if you
mhm,
could talk a little bit more about those outcomes that you might expect to produce from a performance consultative conversation. Because like
mhm.
I say, when you've got content, it's really easy for everyone to understand. They can see that content and they
Yeah.
know that you've done some work, and then they know that it's justified to have the L&D team there.
Mhm. So I think when we understand the actual problem, it will likely fall in one of these four areas. So if it's a knowledge issue, this could be at an individual or a team or even at an organizational level. Performance consulting will help us identify possibly who possesses the knowledge currently, and how do we then transfer that knowledge to people within the business. If it's a skill, we will be able to then pinpoint what are the skills that are actually needed to be developed. And again, this can help us design targeted interventions to address those skills gaps. If it's around motivation, it'll allow us to assess what are some of the motivational factors at play. Is it around incentive? Is it around rewards? Are there other sort of measures that we need to enhance motivation and drive performance? And then lastly, it's around the environment. So what are the external factors that are coming to play? Is it something in the process? Is it something in the systems that we're using? Or is it actually even got to do with the organizational structure? Um, If it is the environmental barriers, we need to then look at how can we create a conducive environment to improve that performance. I think it's also important to note, though, that learning interventions will only contribute to improve performance if the performance gap is primarily due to either a knowledge or a skill. If the underlying problem is related to motivation or environmental factors, I think a learning intervention may have limited impact. And in such cases, I think that if you rely solely on learning as the solution, it's probably going to be an ineffective fix.
Great. So, so we can't just make a course the whole time.
Yes. So I look at it as it's like a learning ecosystem. So there's a whole other factors to play. A learning module might be a part of that, but there's always going to be other factors that needs to support that that gap that we've identified.
Thanks, Stacey. And if someone in the audience today or someone watching the video was thinking, okay, I work at an organization, I'm getting requests all the time from my leadership team to try and change behavior or create some training that can service a new set of skills for our teams, but they wanted to take this type of approach as opposed to just creating a training content approach. How would they go about doing that?
So I don't think there is a there probably is a set process, but this is the process that I go with. So I think for me, it's around finding what suits you. So for me, it's around if a request comes through to me, I will go back and request some further information from the stakeholder. So I would, before any sort of initial meeting that I have with them, I want to ask questions around, give me some insights into what the issues that you are having. I will make it very clear from the get-go that when we have the initial conversation, I want to help them unpack the problem so that we can work together to get to the best solution that will fix their problem. And that learning might not be the end solution. I will then, on my own, I will do some discovery work. I'll learn a little bit about the stakeholder, who that person is, what is their role in the business. I'll look at the area of the business that it's coming from, find out a little bit more about that business and how they work. I'll speak to some of my colleagues to find out, have they actually received a request like this prior? Because we know that also happens. People tend to jump if someone doesn't give them the right answer. They'll see who else can I try and get something from. And then I'll also try and find out a little bit about that person, just to find out the way that they work. Do they like to build relationships first, or do they just want the information? So when I'm coming in, I can give them the best version of myself. And then I'll start to prepare a list of open-ended questions. So this will just generate some of the insights that I want during the conversation. And then I'll obviously set up some time to have the conversation with the stakeholder. When I start the meeting with the stakeholder, I then clarify the purpose of the conversation again. I clarify that this is really a discovery piece, and that I want to understand the problem that the stakeholder is facing. I'll then also set the expectations that I'll be asking questions just so that I can gain a deeper understanding of their issue, and that I can actually understand their process possibly, and see where some of the issues might be. Some of the questions that I might be asking. So I might ask around the problem. So what led to this problem or this learning request? Do they actually have any evidence? Do they have data around this problem? I'll explore how urgent it is. When do they need the solution by? This will then help me determine if it's actually realistic and if it can fit into our work plan. I'll ask around desired outcomes. So what do you actually want to see? What are some of the noticeable changes that they want to see when the solution is out there? We'll discuss what kind of metrics of success and how can we measure that. I'll find out about the existing knowledge within the team or within the business and identify who are the individuals that actually have this knowledge. I'll also ask around, are the audience aware that there's a problem? Because sometimes that's also been uncovered, is that we've said there's a problem, but the audience is not even aware that there's a problem. And then I'll find out about any environmental factors. So what are some of the obstacles that are blocking the performance, such as are there processes in place? Is there any system issues? And then lastly, I'll ask the stakeholder, how open are they to alternative solutions? Because we know that when a stakeholder comes to us, they've got a very clear solution already in mind. So being able to see if they are open helps when we do then provide our recommendation. So these are only a fraction of what I would ask. So I think I would encourage you to start a question bank and you just build it as time goes on. Once I've had the performance consulting conversation, I will wrap up. I'll get all the information I need, and then I'll summarize with the stakeholder, and we'll just reflect back on some of the information that I've gathered. And we'll discuss then what are some of the key insights and agree on then obviously the next steps going from here. If necessary, I'll request any other specific metrics or reports or any other information that will help me with my analysis. And don't stress. If you've missed a question or you think about it and something pops up, just go back to the stakeholder with your additional questions, just so that you know that you're covering all the information before you do your recommendation. And then I always put in some time to reflect. So when I reflect, I take the time to think about the conversation that I've just had. I consider my observation, and I also think around what did the stakeholder give me? What did they say? What questions worked? What questions didn't really get the insights that I wanted? And then that obviously helps me with identifying where I can improve in my next conversation. I think for me as well, and then I'll begin obviously formulating the recommendation that will hopefully address what the stakeholder needs. Before I present that to the stakeholder, I will discuss the findings with my team, just to see if anyone picks up anything that I might have missed. It's always good to get different views than my own, because that will help uncover something that I might have missed. And I think the biggest thing for me is that if the solution is not learning, I think be brave enough to make that recommendation, but have a recommendation of what you might believe would be the fix or the solution for their problem.
Yeah, it's amazing. Thanks, Stacey. I mean, one thing that strikes me is this huge amount of relationship building, really.
100%.
And some of those open questions as well. And not to put you on the spot, but is there an open question you always go to? Is there one that you find that it works really well as a starting point, or one in there?
De Definitely, it's starting with the what is your problem and how do you know that this is a problem? I think that really uncovers it. I think another good approach is the 5 whys. So why? You know, that whole thing to try and really uncover the problem, because sometimes that people don't actually understand their problem. They think they have a problem, but they don't actually understand the problem. So just trying to gauge that from stakeholders. And then another good one is around the success. So what does success look like to you? So
Yeah.
once we've got the solution, what do you want to see change?
And if they're not sure what success looks like to them,
They have a problem,
yeah,
because then they haven't really thought about what they want to achieve. And I think that's what we need to then help them through that. And I think that's the point of the performance consulting. I do have a whole question bank of questions, further questions that I can share with you if you would like to add that as an additional resource.
yeah, sounds great. Thanks, Stacey. I'm sure everyone would love to have some of those, because I think having some practical ones that you can just take away and try and use is really helpful. I think also if you're doing this for the first time, it feels like quite a brave thing to do in a way.
100%. And I can honestly say that no two conversations are the same. So it doesn't matter how good your questions are. You might think, I've got this in the bag. You just never know. So that's why I'm saying just prepare. Prepare.
That's good. Thanks, Stacey. Okay, so I think you've got a sort of example of a story that you of how this would work in practice as well.
Yes. So I've actually got a recent story. So I went on a lovely 5-week holiday back home in South Africa. Got back in May, and I was having a catch up with my colleague, and she later mentioned to me, "Oh, by the way, you've got a project that you need to pick up, and the stakeholder needs a module release in September." Um, so now instead of just diving headfirst into this project, I took a step back and I thought, let me have a proper performance consulting conversation with the stakeholder. I wanted to understand what are their needs and what are the challenges. And more importantly, I also wanted to see whether the learning module was really actually the right solution. So it turned out that the stakeholder had an internal audit, and the finding was that a module needed to be the solution and it would fix the problem. But during the conversation, I picked up that one of the problems is the system. So the system that the people are using doesn't actually have a validation mechanism that cross-checks what people are actually entering into the system. So I've asked the stakeholder to go back to the system provider and find out if their system actually has this. Can we do it? What can't we do regarding validating information? But I think the biggest thing for me is if I had just blindly gone along with what the stakeholder wanted without actually having the essential conversation, I think I would have been setting myself up for failure. I would have created a module, and it definitely wouldn't have addressed the underlying problem. And I would be sitting a year's time, and we'd still be sitting discussing why this problem hasn't been fixed. I think for me, it's around having proper accountability. Um, I think there would be no way to measure the effectiveness of the learning solution if that was the sole solution. We all know how crucial it is to have clear metrics in place to evaluate the impact of our work. Um, but I think if I just gave into what the stakeholder wanted without questioning it, I'm essentially neglecting the need for those measurements. And pulling a report showing how many people have completed a module is not a great metric out there. It's not a great metric to show that there's any change in behavior. Furthermore, I think when a stakeholder believes that learning alone can fix their problem, I think they overlook other factors that could be influencing the performance. It's like the saying, you can put a band-aid on a broken leg. I'm sure, it'll be a temporary fix, but it won't actually solve the problem. And I think by having this performance consulting conversation, it really helped me to uncover the root cause, which is obviously the system is the biggest issue. So through the discovery phase, we've identified a number of touch points that we would need to change behavior. So there's not just one solution. There are different touch points throughout the process. So there will be an initial awareness piece because we are a government agency. We need to have an awareness piece around spending of money. And then there would need to be continued communication. There would be some how-to videos because currently the system doesn't allow for any validation mechanisms. So this temporary solution is how-to, so how to use the system. We need to make sure that our policies and guidelines are accessible. They're in a place where our people visit the most, which is our internal intranet page. So I've worked with our channels team to make sure that the search functions are that the tags are a lot cleaner. So when they search information, the right pages are up front. Sorry. And then ultimately, the end goal is to have something on the system like WalkMe. So WalkMe, apologies, WalkMe is basically a system that goes over your systems and it provides touch points throughout. So when you're moving through systems, it will give you the information that you need.
Sorry, Stacey, do you want to have
No,
like
it's all
a
good.
sip of
Yes,
water?
hold on.
It's okay. It's good to have a drink. Yeah, so I think Seen we've been doing some questions as well. So if anyone's got some questions for Stacey in a minute about sort of how to develop their own sort of performance culture, if you're trying to have a conversation like this with someone in your organization, if if you have any questions for Stacey, feel free to start thinking about those, and we'll move over to the questions space in a second or two.
Sure. So sorry, as I was saying, so the ultimate goal is to have something like WalkMe that's going to be able to provide the information that they need as they're working, because we all know that once you've done a module, I'm not going to go back to it and say, oh, where was this part in the module that spoke about putting in an expense claim, for argument's sake. So it's around how can we actually use different touch points to get the knowledge across.
Great, thanks, Stacey. How you feeling? You okay?
Yeah, all good.
Good. And if you are having a conversation and you need some water, I think you should have water during that conversation. That's good.
Yes.
We're gonna move to questions in a second, but we'll go for one now. Do you always wait for the stakeholder to come to you, or do you ever notice an issue and then go and find the people to help you solve it? That's a good question, isn't it? So yeah, I don't know if you can take a proactive.
Yes. So normally I used to be very proactive within the business, within the company I'm working for currently. We normally get requests that come to us. We do work that we obviously create things based on the needs that we identify. But what we've recently implemented is something called a squad. And that's a combination of, it's led by HR business partners. There's an OD person involved. There is a talent person involved. Myself is involved. And what we actually do is, so it's focusing on a specific business group, and that will help us identify what are the problems. So we're being a lot more proactive in that case. So that's something that we've recently implemented at the moment.
Yeah, great. So I know you've got a few more suggestions as well, so I'll just move on to the next slide.
Mhm.
So yeah, you had a sort of a nice summary really of some of the main things you could do to really try and bring this out and
Mhm.
into practice.
Mhm. So I think for me, over the years, we've always been seen as the vending machine, and produce content on what stakeholder wanted. I think for me, performance consulting has helped reduce unnecessary learning that wouldn't address any problems. And I think the five biggest lessons that I've learned to help me move into a real performance impact is definitely upskilling my partners in the people group. So that's business partners, OD consultants, etc. Um, so create and share just like mini performance guides with your team. I think upskill them so that they can become the triage for you, so that they can ask the necessary questions. And if it really does look like it's a learning request, then it comes through to our team. I think that will then help reduce some of the flow that's coming to us. I think then it's also really understanding your stakeholders. I think doing the discovery work beforehand, finding out what the business really needs, finding about what the people you'll be speaking with. I think discussing it with your colleagues, finding out how can you influence that group a little bit better, and then also finding out who your allies are in the business and who can support you, or even your decisions about the learning request. Another thing that I've found was very helpful was the setting up of an advisory board. So if you're a bigger organization, setting up an advisory board to help work through some of the requests that come through will help then align and see, does it actually fit into the work plan or not. So the advisory board is, there's a L&D head, and then the rest of the board are non-L&D folk, but they do understand the work that we do, and they also have influence across the business. So the purpose of them is basically being able to review any recommendations, and decide if the request aligns with the business strategy or not. Um, I think then also having a good learning strategy in place helps. This for me definitely helps because it's my guiding stars. It gives me the clarity that I need to make sure that the requests that come in are aligned to our business need. And then finally, it's around iteration. I think for me, it's around reflecting on the performance consulting conversation. I think it's around looking at ways on how to improve, identifying what's worked, what possibly didn't work, um, and just taking forward to the next conversation um, better ways of engaging with stakeholders. And like I've mentioned previously, no two conversations are the same. And I think it's just a constant learning process and just fine tuning your consulting skills.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thanks so much, Stacey. One of the key points there was about setting up an advisory board.
Mhm.
And I wonder how hard you've found that to do in the past from a practical side. If that's quite an easy thing to set up, or if
Yeah.
that takes a lot of work to set up.
So I think because we've got such good champions within the business, for us it was pretty easy. Um, I think the thing that we find challenging is when those people leave the business and then having to try and find replacements becomes a challenge. Setting up the cadence is or has been pretty easy and it's pretty smooth sailing. But it is definitely being able to have the right environment and the right people to start creating that.
And if you were trying to create one from scratch, is there any little pointers you'd suggest about how you would maybe do that from nothing?
I think definitely understanding the why, the purpose. Why are we actually setting up this advisory board? Understanding the roles of the advisory board. And I think also it's around, like I said, having understanding who's are those type of people that you need to support. Because basically what it is that they are the sponsors. They are going to be the ones that's going to be um, helping you deal with the noise so that you can continue doing the work.
Great. So you can noisy neighbors. Okay.
Yes.
Um, okay, I'll just make a quick point. We've just recently released a new course in the Totara community. My colleague Rachel has been working on this course, and it's just come out the last week or so. I'll just put a link there. But it's all about building high impact learning with Totara. So talking about action learning, really, when it comes to thinking about building good training really and whether or not you actually need to build training and having more performance consultative conversations and more coaching and things like that. So do go and have a quick look at that course as well if you're looking to learn more. But moving on, does anyone in the audience have any final questions for Stacey today? You're very welcome as well to ask some questions in the community afterwards if you're watching this video. But that question bank does sound really interesting, Stacey. Is that something you've been building up for years now?
Yes, I have. And also, we always when we're discussing it with my team, I've got a very good colleague, Ange, who's been in the business for a while. So she's also a great resource to pick her brain and ask what are some of the questions that she also uses. So I think that's the best thing is always use your colleagues around you or even the communities that you're part of. What are some of the questions that they ask that have had the best impact? And just add it, see what works.
That's great. Thanks so much, Stacey. Well, it's been really great to be able to have this conversation with you today and to really get your insights on this. Um, we've got a few comments saying thank you for sharing. If anyone else has any questions or final comments, you're very welcome. But like I say, can also continue the conversation in the community. Stacey, is there anything that you would like to finish on? Is there any final tips you would give to someone if they were sort of in the maybe at the start of their career or they were thinking about trying this out for the first time? Um, any sort of advice you would give?
I think for me, it's really around just giving it a go. And once you get into it, it takes a I think the most challenging is asking open-ended questions. So what my team and I actually do is we have action learning sessions where if we have a problem or if we actually invite someone else within the people group to come and explain their problem, we use that as an opportunity to practice our consulting skills. So they'll bring the problem and our role is just purely to ask coaching questions, ask open-ended questions to help them unpack that. But that is something else as well, is try use your team and use an opportunity to practice your questioning skills, because I think the best thing is definitely around asking the right questions.
Yeah, just one quick question, I suppose. Do you have to change your performance consulting process when you're the person approaching someone with an issue? I suppose,
Um, go for it, Matt.
no, I just want to, I suppose, does it feel, I don't know, do you feel more? I was thinking in general that one of the issues that I might have with a performance consulting approach is that sometimes it can feel a little bit aggressive in a way, like
Mm,
in
mhm,
the sense that, like, to say why to someone,
mhm.
a lot of adults aren't used to that in a way, to being
Yeah.
questioned deeply and being forced to reflect. So I suppose
Mhm,
one thing is if someone comes to you, then they've made that choice and they've come to you and perhaps they're a bit more open. But if you
mhm.
go to them and then you're also being asking them reflective questions,
Yeah.
yeah, do you have to be more guarded? Do you have to be a little bit softer? Is there a, I don't know.
I think it's really around, definitely around the approach that you are going to go in with. I think for me, it's really around, I am really passionate about learning, and I'm just really want to make sure that we are producing the right content for our people. So it's coming from a place of goodness. It's coming from a place of really trying to um, make sure that we're hitting the mark for our people, because people are our first priority. And I think when you can get that across, being able to ask the question, it's not that you are questioning them as in, is this actually the right approach, but it's really around what is it that we are producing that is going to have the best effect for our people, because that's what is the main focus, is our people. So yes, how does your performance consulting approach change? I think it is more of, I think it's not as a structured, I would say don't have it as such a structured process. It's more of that casual conversation, but bearing in mind that you've got specific things that you want to question or ask, that's going to get you to the answer that you need. So it might not be as vigorous as the questioning that you would normally ask. It would just be around having a conversation like this. Like, hey, I've got this thought. What do you think about this? Have we done this in the past? Do you think this will work? Um, I think that creates that openness for people to share. So that's what I would encourage you to do.
Brilliant. Thanks, Stacey. Yeah, obviously, you have a very natural approach to it as well. So probably maybe it seems easier if you have a natural approach to it. But
Yeah.
yeah. So
But I think
thanks.
it's also that building of relationships. So I
Mm.
think there's another concept that Maori use, and it's called 1,000 cups of teas. And it basically means that it might take you 1,000 cups of teas until you get to what you need to achieve. So it's around having those conversations, and maybe just it's going to take you a little bit longer to get what you need, but have those conversations, build the relationships, and eventually you'll get to what the outcome that you actually need.
So you can achieve everything by 10:30 in the morning. Just a
Yes.
1,000 cups. That's
Yeah, just 1,000 cups.
that's a great. Okay, that's great. Thanks so much, Lisa. That's a lovely expression as well. Thank you. So thanks everyone who's joined us today, and thanks very much for our guest Stacey today. It's been really great to learn from you and to sort of have you guide us in this approach. So thank you so much, Stacey, and thanks for everyone for joining today. Yeah, so I think we'll finish there for this morning or this evening. And but thanks again, Stacey, for joining today, and thanks everyone for coming.
Thank you so much for the time.